welcome Paul. We have the great honor and distinct pleasure to have, I think, one of the foremost leading thinkers on AI in business, Paul Daugherty, who's the CTO, Chief Innovation Officer of Accenture. And so we have a short amount of time, 21 minutes, so we'll try to cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So maybe let's kind of just lay down the groundwork. There's a lot of chat about AI. Lots of enterprises are dipping their toe and kind of buying technologies. What do you see as sort of what's the big impact of AI on businesses and enterprises? Where do you see sort of the applications and use cases?
Yeah, no, I describe AI as like a spry senior citizen. It's the fastest growing 60-year-old technology that we've ever seen, because AI is really not new. I think a lot of people in the audience probably know that. It's, the term was coined in 1956. The research has been going on for a long time, and the AI's been part of our lives for a long time. The recommendations engine, when we first used Amazon back in the late 90s, used machine learning. So what's happened is in the last 5 years, we've had an advance in computing, really computing data and some of the algorithms, and a shift from one branch of AI around symbolic learning to data-based machine learning algorithms. That's fueled this resurgence of interest in artificial intelligence in the last few years. And that's where we are today. And what we're seeing in our business, though, is that even though I really believe it, we're just in the early stages of what's happening with AI. We're really just dealing with one narrow branch of AI with what we're doing today, generally kind of in industry. The impact already, just from what we've seen, is massive. This is the fastest growing trend that we've seen at Accenture and that I've seen in my 30 years in the IT industry. We've never seen a trend, Internet 1.0, client server, mobility, IoT, nothing's moved as fast as AI is moving right now. Measured in people we're bringing into our business and training, measured in revenues with Accenture, measured in projects. So it is indeed moving very fast, but it's also very much misunderstood in terms of where the value is. And the way what we see in the slide there, that we've, this human plus machine perspective, we believe is really important.
Paul has a book that is just coming out.
Yeah, we have a book coming out in 2 weeks. So, and it's available, I think, for some of you for signing afterwards. But the reason we wrote the book is because it is so misunderstood in terms of what the application of AI really is to business. We do believe it's the most transformative technology, bigger impact on business, industry, and society than the internet itself in terms of impact. So I'll add to the hype, even though it's overhyped. But it's misunderstood, and we believe the real impact is in restructuring business and reimagining business processes to allow people to get what we call superpowers by using machines and AI to do their jobs more effectively. And that's really what we talk about in the book, and that's what the work we're doing with a lot of our clients and the 1,500 companies that we research for the book are all about. How do we better combine machine intelligence with human intelligence to create what we call collaborative intelligence, which is kind of people and machines working together to do business more effectively.
You talk in the book about, I think, different waves of evolution of business processes.
Yeah.
Say more about it. Yeah,
well, in the book, what we talk about and what work we're doing with our clients, we're trying to set the stage that this is something you've got to view differently. The impact on your business is massive, and the disruption potential and opportunity for new entrants is massive. Just look at what's, a couple announcements of the last couple of weeks. Roche bought Flatiron Health, massive data play for Roche moving to pharmaceuticals into health management and with a database business like Flatiron. Look at Amazon's, Whole Foods last year, and Amazon with JPMC going into health and now banking. And a lot of these are fueled by data and intelligence and new capabilities they can bring into the market. So we believe this really is about reimagining what you do. And we call that the third generation of business process, or the third generation of work. The first generation was Henry Ford, automation. It was, how do we replace the work of the hands that we have in assembly lines, and
standardization of business.
Frederick Taylor, scientific management standardization. That was the first generation, 100 or so years ago. The second generation was the hammer age, re-engineering the corporation. A lot of us did that work back in the 90s, and that was about taking time and space and distance out of processes, but it was still the same process. You still flow-charted the same process, and you automated it. And actually, that led to a lot of automation of work that was really not that human-like. It was injecting humans operating often as machines into very static processes. And that was the second generation. We believe the opportunity in the third generation is dynamic, adaptive, personalized processes, personalized to the task you're doing, personalized to the worker, dynamic, adaptive, and continually changing, powered by AI and machine learning, a very different way of working, and it requires a very different thought process to apply that to your business. An example, just because that sounds great, and everybody says, well, what do you really mean? An example is GE. We were just talking to GE earlier. We talked, during the book, we talked to a lot of executives at GE, and what GE or Siemens or Schneider are doing with the digital twin concept is a good example, creating a software-based, AI-based virtual model of a real machine fed with real data so that you can do things like run future scenarios on an aircraft engine to decide if it might fail, and then the maintenance technician engineer can in real time decide how to personalize the service for that engine. A much more interesting job for that person to do than a periodic daily, weekly, monthly driven checklist of let's go check everything and see what might happen. More interesting job, higher availability in the equipment, more productive, better quality, and that's the opportunity to reimagine.
Because the challenge, I guess, with business processes is once it's implemented, the needs of the business keep changing and evolving, and sort of how do you make the process adaptive to the business?
Yeah, and that's the other opportunity of learning. And another example that I'll give it, and I love the industrial example, because we always think of these kind of customer-oriented examples with AI, but the industrial examples are interesting. Another example is work we're doing for one of the largest manufacturers in the world, and their issue is they don't have enough workers. We're worried about machines putting people out of work. The reality is there's not enough people to do the jobs that exist. So what we're doing is using AI, machine learning with mixed reality headsets to apply to their workforce. So their best workers and their newly learning workers are all using this technology. It's learning the best practice from the best workers. It's learning the gaps in the lower skilled workers. And it's helping everybody do their jobs more effectively and advance more quickly in their careers, do more complex work, learning continuously and changing the way that each individual is working. That's the future of work, dynamic, adaptive, personalized to the task somebody's doing.
I think the dominant sort of, shall we say, thinking is that machines are going to replace human beings in business. And I think you have a somewhat different perspective. I think you see it as sort of an increase in jobs.
Yeah, I kind of think the idea of all the jobs going away is nonsense, to be honest. That's not the future, in my view, and not the future based on the research we see. Even if you look, and frankly, it's a US-based discussion. If you go to many other countries around the world, you don't hear a lot about jobs because their issue is not enough people to do work. That's the issue in a lot of parts of the world. And even in the U.S. today, we have 6 million open jobs, and we have 6 million unemployed people. We created 240,000 jobs, I think, last month alone, new jobs to add to that total. And so the issue is we have the same number of unfilled jobs as we have unemployed people. The issue is how do we get people the right skills? So one of the things we're doing with the book and one of the things we're investing in at Accenture is how do we create the platforms to reskill people more quickly? So we invest $1 billion a year in Accenture in reskilling. We've actually got an AI tool that our people can use that'll tell you at what risk is your job from being automated or replaced by AI for every one of our people. So it'll evaluate and say, well, you're at risk in this time frame for this reason because of the kind of work you do. And then we can direct that person to the right training and learning boards to rebuild their skills to jobs we identify that have adjacency to what they already know. That's the future of corporate learning, is investing in your people like you would invest in capital equipment to continuously improve their capability over time. And as a statement on that, we're donating all the proceeds from the book to organizations that are working on this issue of mid-career reskilling. Because we think the issue is, K through 12 is getting a lot of focus. It's still kind of broken, needs a lot of work, but it's getting focus. Higher ed's getting a lot of focus. But the middle ground of apprenticeships.
What you call the missing middle.
Kind of missing middle, but it's apprenticeships. It's the people who will be displaced, because job displacement's a real issue. In spite of everything I said, we'll have enough jobs. A lot of people won't have the right skills to be viable. We need an inclusive approach that everybody can be skilled and viable for the new jobs.
So some of the jobs are going to be done by bots and machines.
Yep.
And then there are just some jobs that only humans can do.
Right.
Are there is there a range of other things, other new types of jobs in the enterprise?
It's a good question. Robbie's read the book. That was a good leading question. Thank you. Yeah. What we lay out in the book is there's a lot of the focus has been on what machines do well, which is repetition, prediction, processing data, memorization. That's what machines are good at. Humans are good at improvisation, creativity, communication, emotion, empathy. And we focus on the polar opposites. We haven't focused on what it means to bring that together. We call that the missing middle. And we've identified 6 categories of new jobs in the middle that are the source of the new jobs of the future. And the good news is they're jobs that are very interesting jobs and jobs you can train a wide array of people for, not just the traditional notion of white collar or blue collar. We call them no collar jobs because we need a lot of different forms of education and apprenticeships and training to prepare people for these jobs. An example of a job in the missing middle is something we're hiring for at Accenture today, which is a personality trainer for AI. It's not the data tagging training. That's a pretty basic.
Not labeling and those.
Labeling. That's a pretty basic thing, although we need people to do that. This is personality training. So if we're developing a virtual agent for an airline, which we're doing, and a bank, and an insurance company, and a healthcare company, it's one of the hottest areas in AI right now. Each of them needs different values, different personality, different response. You might want a snarky, humorous behavior for one company. You might want a conservative, button-down behavior for another company. Who's going to train the personality and monitor and measure and tweak the personality of the agent over time? We're hiring some people that have backgrounds as diverse as poetry to sociology and psychology to do that work. It's not technology work, it's not the programming, it's the behavioral side of it. And that's just one example of the jobs we see being very important in this missing middle as we go forward.
What do you think, you talked about skills being kind of a challenge or a barrier. What do you think are some of the other barriers for a kind of a business to embrace AI?
Yeah, I think the barrier for a lot of companies is talent and where to get started. And that's why we talk about a framework in the book. We call it MELDS. So you have to come up with an acronym for these things. It's 5 letters, MELDS. It stands for the 5 things we think you need to do to get started. The first is the mindset around reimagining, which is you need to start at the top and think about how do you really don't just add on a data lake with a machine learning algorithm to do predictive analytics for one part of your business. That may be a good place to start, but you need a mindset of really stepping back and looking at your business and where it can add value. If you're a life sciences company, it might be the drug R&D research process, and how do you really reimagine that? So that's the first step, the mindset for reimagining. Then there's an experimentation process to go through. You do need to start and try it because you can't design this and get it right from the start. A good example is what Amazon's doing with the Go stores, applying intelligence checkout lists, retail stores that they're developing. They tried it out on their own employees first. They tested it. They improved it. Now they're deploying. That's the mindset, or that's the experimentation you need. Leadership's a big thing. I just met with a group of financial services CEOs. They're concerned about the leadership implications of AI. So if they deploy AI in the know your customer process in financial services, what's the potential compliance or regulatory implications of it? And how do they deploy AI in an ethical way that's within the regulatory boundaries, or how do they influence and change the regulatory guidelines of these industries to be acceptable in the age of AI? How do you avoid bias and discrimination, which are magnified by AI and are real serious issues we need to deal with as AI moves forward? And so there's a set of leadership things. And then there's data and skills. So it's that mindset, experimentation, leadership, data, and skills.
And the ability to collect data and cleanse data, those kinds of things?
Data is the biggest gap for many companies. A lot of the companies we're working with, they see what they need to do. For example, one of the largest big box retailers we're working for right now, and a very interesting AI approach they want to use to optimize sales across both online and in stores. A very interesting, ambitious proposal. The issue is getting the data to do it, getting the data inside their company aligned across the silos, because online and in store are different businesses in the way this company runs them, and also getting the external data of what's happening in one of their stores in a city somewhere in the heartland of America, say. Is it raining that day? What's the temperature? What are seasonal promotions and such, or events that they might build in to their overall promotions? And getting that external data, internal data aligned across silos is really the barrier. It's not the algorithms, it's not the behavioral change in the company, even in their case, it's getting that data to drive the algorithms.
What's the corporate responsibility when they deploy AI? There's kind of good AI, which is helping increase productivity and so forth. Yeah. But there's kind of AI that goes rogue.
Yeah. Well, I guess I believe since the first piece of technology, whatever it was, when we ground a stone into something sharp to help us hunt animals, could also kill a person with it. So any technology we've ever invented can be used for good or bad. Technology is neutral. It's how people use it, and that's why for AI, it's the same. It's how do we put in place the right guidelines, and that's why we, in the book, talk about our framework for responsible AI in business. And it's something we're working with Partnership on AI and OpenAI and many other organizations on as well. We do believe we need a strong, solid, ethical, and responsibility code of how to apply AI. So that's one element of it. The other element of it is we need to police it. And we need to understand when companies or when bad actors are going rogue with it. Some of the most exciting developments in AI right now are happening in the hacking cyber community. The bad guys' use of AI in hacking is pretty phenomenal. You can learn a lot if you want to go see some exciting things happening in AI. So we need to be looking at that, policing it, and developing AI and using AI in a policing or in a prevention mindset in that case as well. So it's no different than any other technology that we need to develop responsible codes of behavior for how to use it properly. We need to develop the policing and other mechanisms to prevent against rogue use.
And in many areas, people kind of want to be able to explain how a conclusion has come to.
Yeah.
And as opposed to it just being a kind of black box magical conclusion.
I think that's an interesting debate. We spend a lot of time with our clients on this issue of explainability and black box AI. To me, it's not that hard of an issue. There's certain, and it gets down to just this third generation of process and how do you look at your business. When you look at your business, there's certain things that you better be able to explain. It's not acceptable to say, I used an algorithm I can't explain in my consumer lending practices. I should be able to explain how and why I loan money to somebody. Something that got a lot of attention in the US recently is one of the court jurisdictions used black box AI for sentencing, so it spit out a number, and they couldn't explain why. Should you use black box algorithms for sentencing criminals, the criminal justice system? I would say no. So you need to look at where you should use it or not, and that's really a management decision. It's not that the technology is good or bad. Where should you use techniques that can't be explained? The other side that's very promising is there's a lot of exciting research, including an article that's just released today on a new technique for explainability. We're going to see the gap between unexplainable and explainable narrow substantially in the next 3 years, 5 years. It's going to narrow substantially. It's already going down. You can use adversarial networks and approaches where you partition your data and use adversarial networks to monitor, and one neural net can try to understand and explain what the other is doing. There's techniques like LIME, local interpretable model explanation, which is a technique to, after the fact, go in and understand how a neural net made its decision. And those techniques are advancing rapidly. And there'll always be things we can't explain, but the gap's going to be narrower. And it really just comes down to a leadership decision of, in your business, what things should be explainable and what things are okay to not be explainable. I'd argue a vision algorithm, it's fine for that not to be explainable. You just need to be able to have the best probability that you identified something properly. But there's a lot of things that do need to be explainable.
I want to go back to this business process thing that you mentioned earlier. So some jobs are going to be replaced by bots. And you said there is going to be some new category of jobs.
Yep.
In kind of post-2000s, after ERP came and post-Y2K, there was this whole kind of outsourcing of jobs and BPOs, typically in India and Philippines and other places, where kind of, I would say, low-skilled kind of jobs went. With the sort of emergence of bots and robotic process automation and AI, how do you see BPOs evolving, and what's the change to that industry?
That's a great question.
There are tens of millions of jobs out there.
That's a great question. That's, as you know, BPO is a big part of our business, and our approach with BPO, that part of our business, business process outsourcing, has been to use technology to disrupt it as fast as we can. So we've been implementing bots, we call them nanobots. We've got thousands of nanobots that we're using in our business to automate it. We're using AI. We've got, Julie knows the number, I forget the number, hundreds of AI agents that we've employed using real AI techniques that are performing services and jobs in our BPO business. But we've increased employment in our BPO business because what we found is somebody that was doing loan analysis in part of our BPO business and loan data entry and things like that, we can retrain them to do other things and upskill them and expand the business. So as we've automated, we've actually expanded the headcount and grown the business. So we think that opportunity exists for a lot of organizations. That's the focus that we have.
I'll maybe ask a concluding question. Maybe we can have some questions. So you and I last ran into each other at this art club.
Can we talk about that?
On a Friday evening. And so what do you think is the role of art and artists? You mentioned something about poets, art and artists in this new kind of age of AI.
No, it's a fantastic question. I think we might have talked about this at this gallery we're at. I think we're entering an era where AI is going to allow our world to be a lot more human, and business is going to be more human, and jobs are going to be more human. So rather than entering a more mechanical age, which is I think where the industrial age and the first and second generation of process took us to, this is a human age we're entering into, where the technology can enhance our ability to communicate and interact as people. That's what we believe, I believe. In that case, the skills that are going to be really important in the next 5+ years as it really scales are going to be the more human-oriented skills. So right now we bemoan the STEM skill shortage. We have 500,000 open programming positions in the US. I think that's an area where we'll automate.
Should be
improve.
STEAM, not STEM, with the A standing for art.
It should be, but I think even that's minimizing it. That's like throwing a little A in as an afterthought and saying we need a little bit of arts in the STEM. I think you almost need to reverse and put the A on top, arts and humanities on top of what we need with STEM. And that's what's going to be important. I saw something Stanford was doing to train. Stanford was adding a ethics module to their computer science curriculum. I think that's great. But they're not the ones who are going to fix the programmers aren't going to fix the ethics issues in companies. We need people who are deeply grounded in ethics and rhetoric and sociology and skills like that to deal with these issues. So my fear and my belief is that 5 years from now, we'll be more short on humanities skills that have a STEM understanding and can apply those skills to the human experience, to how we need to operate companies and train people and run processes. And that's something we need to think about. So we talk about that a lot in the book, is kind of an age where kind of humanities and different types of skills become important. And the other interesting data point, there's a lot of entrepreneurs and investors in the room. If you look at a lot of the leading entrepreneurs, you look at Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, you look at Dorsey and Twitter and people like that, a lot of them come from liberal arts backgrounds because they're people who understand how to apply technology to experience. And in the generation we're moving to, that's not just tech, that's every industry is going to need people who can do that.
Good. Do we have time for a few questions? Any questions out there? Please, go ahead.
So for investments, first of all, thank you very much. For investments, where do you see, the largest potential investments in which areas? And based upon what you're saying, this massive acceleration that we're seeing in the last 5 years.
Yeah, a couple things I'd say, and part of what I do is run Accenture Ventures, which is our corporate venture arm as well, where we're very active in this area. One thing I'd say is we probably don't need a lot of new chatbot companies at this point. There's probably about 2,000 of those 2,000 chatbot startups out there. We probably need some great ones, but there's a ton of investment that's gone to that, and I think that's kind of overheated in my view. I think what we lack, or an area where there's a lot of opportunity, is data, and there's some interesting things happening there too, but the handling of data is a real gap. Companies are struggling. It's very siloed. Even the interesting startups that are doing things tend to be pretty siloed with it. So data, I think, is a massive area of opportunity. I think some of the speech and natural language and vision, that's going to be the bigger companies. It's going to be hard for smaller companies to match the innovation there. The other really promising area, in my opinion, is industry-specific algorithms that solve specific problems. So health, wellness, industrial automation, things,
financial services.
Financial services. Yeah, there's some very interesting things happening. Compliance-related tech. In compliance tech, compliance-driven AI is a very interesting area for us in terms of how we're investing our R&D and also in terms of investments we're looking at. So those are some of the areas.
Maybe one more question. Go ahead, Mike.
You talked a lot about completely automating certain tasks, chatbots, notwithstanding that's one example. What about the other end of the spectrum where AI is used to augment decisions, not replace people who make very valuable decisions, but somehow make them more productive,
Yeah.
or optimize their decisions?
Yeah. To be clear, that's where I think the biggest opportunity is. The question was where, beyond automating, where's the combination of human and machine come in, and that's where the big.
Where do they collaborate?
Yeah, that's the big opportunity is collaboration. I think of it. There's 3 areas where you can apply AI. It's sensing, so vision and hearing, interacting, chatbots and interaction and such, and thinking. And in that last area of thinking, that's where we're seeing a tremendous opportunity. An example in this compliance area is anti-money laundering processes in banks. Lots of people that do a lot of manual processes for compliance for anti-money laundering as one compliance example. Equipping those people with better tools to understand the patterns and what's really happening so that they can go from false positives to real compliance issues is a huge opportunity. It improves the quality of the work so everybody's not just chasing the false leads, improving their productivity and improving the efficiency of the business. And that's where there's tremendous opportunity.
Thank you, Paul. Buy the book.
I don't know. Is that? Okay, yeah, we have copies of the book. It's on we'll be back there at the back corner if you want copies of the book. So please join us if you'd like a copy of the book.
Machine. It's
Human plus machine.
Human plus machine and imagining work in the age of AI. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Ravi. Yeah.